when it comes down to like hitting PRs, trying new movements, opening up businesses, all different types of shit. What's up, y'all? It's JD and James, and we're back with another quick video. In today's video, we want to touch on failure and why you should never have the fear of failure, and how you can kind of get locked in a self-made prison hole if you have that fear of failure, because you're never actually going to get out and try things in the world, or you're never going to push yourself past your mental limits. And this can be in the physical realm, or it can be in the mental realm, or whatever. And one way that I think about this is, me and James obviously are always talking about calisthenics, but you could think about it in terms of weightlifting if you're trying to go after a PR, or you can think about this in terms of, like, say for instance, handstands. Me and James have been at the gym probably the last, two days, failing nonstop. We've been trying to hit this one-arm handstand. We've probably made about 100 attempts each in this one-arm handstand in the last couple days, and we've been failing nonstop, but we've been making micro victories along the way. And I think one reason why a lot of people are scared to fail is because of other people's perception of them. Because if somebody sees you, in the gym trying to hit, just to say for instance you can't do a handstand, and somebody sees you failing over and over again doing a handstand, you're embarrassed. Or even if you're doing it by yourself, you just get discouraged because you're thinking to yourself like, this is pointless, I'm never going to be able to get this movement. But you have to understand that it truly takes failure over and over again to not only get stronger physically, but to get stronger mentally, to kind of toughen yourself up mentally, and to be able to deal with that type of stuff. And I've dealt with failure in my life in the business end of things. I've dealt with failure in my life with relationships. I've dealt with failure in my life when it comes down to calisthenics, or sports, basketball as well. And for me, I've always learned from my mistakes, and I've always been better because of it. I had business doing vintage clothing in Japan at first, and it failed. It actually failed pretty badly, to be completely honest with you. I didn't make any money, and I actually lost money in that business, and I tried to do it for probably about a year until I finally got to the point where I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing with this. Let me recalculate everything. Let me take a step back and then figure everything out from there. And eventually I ended up going to Japan and starting a successful Airbnb business, made a good amount of money. But I think it took for me to have that failure first to really be able to learn some things from it and make some changes.
Yeah, those are some very good points. And it's so funny. I remember reading this quote. I don't even know where I read this, but it was talking about basically how you're not ever starting from scratch. You're always starting with your previous experiences. And so taking on different ventures in your life, you can't really measure the value you get out of it only by a monetary perspective, or whatever is a traditional version of success for you. You have to view it as what lifetime experience and what kind of lessons that you're going to learn from all those experiences that you take on. And failure, I feel like, is probably the most important thing for gaining success, right? Because if you want to start something new and you ever want to be good at something, well, the first step to being good at something is to absolutely suck at it and actually start. Just take that first step, embarrass yourself by going to the gym when you weigh 300 pounds. You think people are judging you when they're really not. That's actually going to be your own projection. But I mean, it's not like this is any different for any aspect of life. If you're ever going to be going into a new venture, a new journey, a new culture, a new place, whenever you first start, you're going to be terrible. You're not going to understand how it works. You're not going to have the tools that you need for it. You're not going to have the experience necessary to be good at it right off the bat. And you're going to make a fool of yourself. And that's actually the only way that you can ever become good at something. And I was also reading the other day about how apparently if you start learning a language after, I think it was like 13 years old, you're never going to sound like a native speaker in that language. But one of the reasons why little kids learn languages so much easier is because they weren't afraid of making all these weird sounds. And so if someone's trying to learn a new language and, you're too proud to, sound like a fool or mumble your words or, make some sounds with your mouth that you think sound ridiculous or are going to make you sound like a child, then you're actually setting yourself up in the future to be a greater fool, because you're going to incorrectly learn that language or a skill. And so I've always said, it's always much better to, pay the dues early on and look like a fool, rather than let that compound and make you look like a much greater fool in the future when you really don't know what happens and it actually matters.
And another thing about that is, like, I don't necessarily look at it as you're going to look like a fool, so to speak, all the time, but it's more so that you're going to have regret. You know what I mean? If you were scared to step outside of your comfort zone and do something that you might have always wanted to do, but you were scared to look stupid doing it. One thing I remember, and this isn't really a regret of mine, but it is something where I did find myself too scared to try something. And it was when I was in high school. I first went to a high school called Berkeley High School, which is in the East Bay area in California. And then I ended up transferring to a high school called El Cerrito High School, which is not too far down the road. But I played basketball, I ran track in high school. And the football coaches at both schools were always trying to get me to come play football because I had a good build for it, because I had good athleticism. But in my mind, I never played football before. I never played Pop Warner football. I never played I played football in the streets with some of my friends or whatever, but I didn't even really know the rules like that. So, and I never really watched football either when I was a kid. That wasn't really my sport. So even though I did, there was a part of me that really wanted to go out there and try to play, but the part of me that didn't want to look like an idiot out there because I didn't know the rules or because I didn't know too much about the sport prevented me from taking a chance and going out and getting outside of my comfort zone and potentially doing a sport that I would have loved and I probably would have been really good at. When I was in high school, I was about the same size I am right now. I'm 6 feet tall, about 185 pounds. Probably back then I was about 175, 80 pounds. But that's really good size for a high school football player. And for somebody who had a decent amount of athleticism at, 15, 16, 17 years old, who knows where I could have ended up taking my football career. Now that I look back on it, I'm still not mad about it just because of all the concussions and the physical damage that football does to your body. But at the end of the day, if you want to try something, I'm really a firm believer that you actually have to get out there. Just like James says, you're going to be really bad at it at first. I remember when I first started calisthenics, fortunately for myself, I feel like some people have a little bit more of a tolerance when it comes down to looking bad at something and just kind of having I would almost say it's kind of good to be delusional about your potential to a certain extent. And even if you're failing at something, you're still delusional that you think that you're right on the cusp of being great at it. And I think for me, sometimes in my life, I've actually had that delusion. And I think one area that this really can actually help you with is when you're dealing with women. If you're delusionally confident, then you're going to have a lot more success with women than somebody who probably should be confident in themselves and, is a little bit hesitant when it comes down to talking to women. So when it comes down to dealing with women, if you're a young man out there watching this video, 15, 16, 17 years old, when you first start talking to women or striking up conversations, you're going to fumble your words. You're not really going to know what to say. But eventually you're going to realize that women are just human beings and you can just have a casual conversation with them just like you can have with your homeboys or just like you can have with your parents or whatever it may be. And to be completely honest with you guys, that even at the age that I'm at right now, sometimes I talk to women and I still fumble my words around. Sometimes I talk to anybody and I still fumble my words around. But you just have to have that, get rid of that fear mindset and get rid of that fear of failure.
Man, this actually brings up a really good point. You're talking about, I might take it a little bit different of a direction, but I actually think this is actually peak masculinity if you think about basically mating strategy and how men are basically designed to, take a lot of risk and, women are designed to play it safe, right? And obviously it goes back to that's how we survive as a species, but it was interesting. So there's actually a study that shows that when men apply for jobs, they're much more willing to apply for jobs that they're not qualified for, not even close, and that women basically only apply for jobs when they already know they have it in the bag. And it was kind of funny because the person that actually brought that statistic up to me actually brought it up in a negative light towards the men that are applying for the jobs they weren't qualified for, even though the purpose behind that statistic was actually why males were having more success getting hired. So it was actually benefiting them more in the long run. And I was thinking about it. That's actually probably the peak masculine trait you can have, is actually taking shots, taking risks. That's actually what men were designed to do, is to have a high risk, high reward strategy, whether it's for acquiring resources, whether it's for mating. Where men are designed for high risk, high reward, not, this playing it safe and like, oh, take the guarantee route. That's basically how women were designed to be wired, to basically keep the family together and, keep the species propagating forward.
And if I could cut in one second in terms of like that risk-taking mindset, if you're out there and you're like 60, or like, let's just say 18 years old. If you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, this is when you should be taking the most risks. This is when you should be getting out of your comfort zone the most, because you have so much time to bounce back even if it doesn't work out. So when it comes down to developing a new skill set, to seeing if you're good at something, when it comes down to developing a new skill set to see if you're good at something, when it comes down to, trying to, find a girlfriend, or, going out and approaching women, and when it comes down to the real world, not just using a dating app, swiping on a dating app. When it comes down to, going to a job interview, these are things that you need to be taking a risk. Or even traveling. This is something that me and James have been talking about a lot lately, and it's something that I've done a lot throughout my life. And I've traveled all over the world, and I can remember, vividly when I was about 23, 24, 25 years old, I used to actually want to have people come and travel with me. But one thing I realized around the age of 25 years old is that you're never going to travel anywhere if you're waiting for your friends to come with you, because most people are actually too scared to take that chance to actually get their passport and go overseas and go into a completely foreign environment where they're completely out of their comfort zone. Maybe they don't speak the language. Maybe they don't know how safe it is. Maybe they don't know how to get around because they don't know the geography of the place. They don't know anything about the culture. So these are the times when you really need to step out into the world and actually start taking these risks and start seeing what you're really made of. Because in all reality, I think that life is kind of a test in a lot of ways anyways, to kind of test ourselves to see, what we're made of, how far we can push our potential, how strong our character is, how strong our mind is, how strong our body is.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really what we're here on Earth to do, is discover our potential and, basically push up against that limit and put your back against the wall and then see what you can pull off. And, I think a lot of times, I think that's the most beautiful thing about life, actually, is kind of seeing that you're capable of something that previously you thought was impossible, or previously you thought that was for someone else. I think there's no greater feeling in the world than that. That to me is like where you get that fulfillment, that true fulfillment, and not, temporary pleasure or, temporary and fleeting happiness, but that deep fulfillment is when you really unlock a new part of yourself and you're like, oh wow, I didn't actually, know I had that in me. I think that's honestly what it really all boils down to. I think in every single aspect of our life, I think that's truly what our journey is actually discovering that we're more than we thought we were.
And let me tell you guys something from a personal note from myself, is that you're not always even gonna believe in yourself. Sometimes I've went down a journey and I didn't 100% even believe in myself, but I just stuck with it. I don't know what was keeping me to stick with it, but I just stuck with it anyway. And it actually ended up working out, and I actually ended up surprising myself. And a lot of times I notice I do this with calisthenics as well. I might start training for a certain movement, and in my mind, I'm unsure if I'm even going to be able to ever accomplish this movement, or if I'm able to accomplish this movement in a time span that I want to accomplish it. And then I end up surprising myself, and then I end up hitting it just because I put the work in. And I think the more that you practice something and the more that you force yourself to do certain things, the more confident that you get in whatever it is that you're doing. That could be a sport, that could be, some type of skill set you're developing. It could be traveling, it could be talking to women, whatever part of life that you're talking about.
Yeah, one thing for you guys out there with kind of that more negative mindset that almost is like
beta
upset at
I'm just fucking around.
That are upset at life in general, almost just mad at, I guess you could call it God, or they're mad at the universe, or they're mad at, whoever they believe cursed them with whatever poor situation they got thrust into. One thing I guess I could say you could try to give yourself a little bit of peace is actually you do the right thing. So let's say, for example, you're complaining about your situation with work, or you're complaining about your financial situation. Take a step back and say, in my position, what is the right move for me to do every single day? Even if you don't believe it's gonna work, it doesn't matter. But before you start screaming at the high heavens and blaming this external whatever it is, life, randomness, God, before you start turning and having that kind of disdain for that, do what you can, do what you actually know is the right thing to do. It could even be it could say, okay, I don't like my job, okay, I want to transition careers. Where can you start? Okay, I don't know where to start. Okay, I'm going to read a book about how to change careers. Okay, you start reading that book. Okay, they recommend you something. Try it out. Follow it. Go through with it. And you do your part. And then if at the end of that it doesn't work out, then you can go back to blaming the higher powers.
Or you just try something else. Yeah, I think, but the thing is you can say that right now, but the thing is once you actually try something and you give it a try, and even if you fail, you're going to still develop a certain amount of confidence because you've actually tried something. And I think one thing that holds a lot of people back from trying is the fear of failure, because they're worried about what the external world thinks about them. And, that's probably the worst mentality that you can actually have. I can remember growing up with a few people who were kind of like those sideline haters. It's like they never actually played the sport, but they'd always be at the high school games talking shit about the home team or the people on the home team, because they were actually jealous that this person was actually made the team and they actually went out and tried to, be great. In life, we have to dare to be great. And just like James said before, that's just a risk that we take. And that's like a masculine trait that you have to have. You have to dare to be great. And a lot of people who are the people who are going to talk shit about you are the people who are scared to be great, who are the people who are scared to take risks. So those are the last people that you need to be paying attention to. So just keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about maybe the way that you're going to be perceived by the outside world. And maybe when you're in that grind of, trying to accomplish something, or maybe starting a new journey down a certain type of path, maybe that's the time where you need to unplug from social media so you don't necessarily even have that unnecessary external influence on yourself. Maybe that's the time where you kind of need to go into solitude and really hone in on the task at hand. But guys, that's pretty much it for this one. We're going to be coming out with a ton of content when it comes down to like these talking points or these mindset talking points. If you guys have anything that you guys would like us to speak on, leave it in the comment section. If you guys leave a comment, that also helps out the algorithm, and we'll get this message out to more people. We're trying to build this community up with like-minded individuals who are trying to improve themselves on a mental, physical, spiritual, financial level, all of those. Anyways, guys, hope everybody's having a great day out there. We'll holla at you guys later. Peace.